It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
At Amica Insurance, we know it's more than just a car. It's the two-door coupe that was there for your first drive, the hatchback that took you cross-country and back, and the minivan that tackles the weekly carpool. For the cars you couldn't live without, trust Amica Auto Insurance. Amica. Empathy is our best policy.
Pulling up to Mickey D's just for drinks? Oh yeah, that's me. Nothing extra, just perfection and a straw. Coming in hot for the coldest cups on the block. Because there are drinks. Then there are drinks from McDonald's.
Mix things up with any size lemonade or sweet tea for $1.49. Perfect with our classic fries. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Before you use AI to transform your agency, you need to begin with trust. Introducing Watson X Governance, helping you govern any AI as data, models, and policies change so you can scale it responsibly. Let's create AI that begins with trust with Watson X Governance. Learn more at ibm.com/federal. IBM. Let's create.
Let's giddy up, my friends. The fantasy hockey season is red hot, and you're tapped into the hottest show in the game. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We're taking a look at the top news from across the NHL, including what is going on with Aaron Ekblad and these Panthers. Let's tap in and let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back inside the lab, everybody, to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Wednesday edition, and I'm joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele, wrote in on this side of the microphone. It's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. Shout out to the everydayers, and thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Look, Steele, we come on here and we give a lot of predictions, breakdowns, bets, and otherwise. But I think over the last couple of weeks, for all of those who have been tuned and tapped in Monday through Friday, we're trying to give it to y'all in a 30-minute breakdown and let you know what's going on around the league. And on today's episode, that's exactly what we have to do, because I really do feel there are some leagues already in the playoff Steele. Most people starting next week. This is money season. So Aaron Ekblad, he's out. Going to be at least a couple of weeks at the most crucial time of the season. Florida Panthers, we'll talk about them. And, of course, Vladimir Tarasenko, the fantasy impact peripheral pieces. What do you do with some of the Florida Panthers in your lineup? Mitch Marner, day-to-day. I don't know about you, Steele, but looking at the Maple Leafs attack against the Montreal Canadiens without Mitch Marner, this guy needs to be in the lineup every single night if this team is going to succeed. That's clear. Speaking of which, Byram, I think, is going to be in line for a lot of success in the Buffalo Sabres franchise. I'm excited to pick your brain about him. Update on Thatcher Demko and Wednesday's bets. Right over to you, though, Steele, because this Florida Panthers team not only is the best squad going on paper, they are the best team in the NHL in the standings and proving it right now. Red hot. Ekblad out. What's your take on the Panthers and what's going on down south?
Yeah, I mean, the Florida Panthers are just absolutely unreal. Such a strong team. They've got strong goaltending. That's why I had Bobrovsky and Stolarz as my number one tandem in the NHL.
Yes, you did.
They've got Paul Maurice at the helm behind the bench, one of the best coaches, if not the best coach. So This team's firing on all cylinders. They get Tarasenko at the trade deadline, the only move they had to make, and he's got 3 points in 2 games. So we'll touch on Vladimir Tarasenko in a little bit, but let's start with Aaron Ekblad with the injury. Set to miss 2 weeks with a lower body injury, actually collided with newly acquired Vladimir Tarasenko in that 5-1 win against Calgary. So he's out of the lineup for 2 weeks. It's been a fairly disappointing season for Aaron Ekblad overall, offensively when it comes to mind. He hasn't been a strong fantasy defenseman as I thought he would have been, or at least hoped he could be this upcoming season. And I know he started the year off injured, but I mean, he produces in every other category: hits, blocks, shots, plus minus, penalty minutes, every other category. He's producing some fantastic stats on a nightly basis. But this season, 17 points in 46 games. Last season, 38 points in 71 games, a career high 57 3 years ago. So I've been fairly disappointed with his offensive output the last 2 years. You know how high I was on him when we first started this podcast.
Sure.
I thought he was going to be an absolute banger, top fantasy defenseman in the league. That hasn't been the case for him, A, because of injuries, but B, just isn't producing as a number one overall draft defenseman or prior number one draft defenseman should be doing, especially, which is crazy to me, with all the talent that he's surrounded by and, the heavy minutes that he plays on a nightly basis. The fact that he's been a career 30 to 40 point player every single season is pretty mind boggling to me. I'm fairly surprised by that. And going into next season for Aaron Ekblad, I'm not sure how high I'll put him on the fantasy draft board because of the low numbers offensively.
It's a really, really good point about Aaron Ekblad. And obviously, as a guy who was a first overall draft pick, carries a whole lot of fantasy sway in terms of what his name is. It's a sexy one. And look, I'm not trying to take away from a guy who obviously on the ice, you and I have to talk about this a lot and separate it sometimes in terms of when he is on his game, his ability to impact Florida's ability to win games is obviously on the ice. He's a difference maker when he's on his game. He just hasn't lived up to the hype. And that's just it right there for me when I talk about Aaron Ekblad. If it's the number one takeaway, maybe it's not his fault he was drafted first overall. And maybe he, looking now at what he's done over his career, 346 points in 672 career games, which is nothing to shake a stick at. But when you look at that, maybe you just look and go, maybe he should have been drafted 6th or 7th overall. And our expectations would have been a little bit different. And by now, we probably would have expected him to fade into this realm of 30 to 40 points a year when really, I think, when you look at his numbers in junior, definitely thought he had some more offensive output. However, him being out for the Florida Panthers is significant because I know he eats over 20 minutes of ice time per night. And let me just bring that up. It's 21 and change. Yeah. So there's something right there. I think they're more than good enough, Steele, to be okay down the stretch with him. However, we know that one of the reasons they fell short against Vegas, they were so banged up. And that's a part of winning a Stanley Cup, most definitely, is what Warriors are going to show up. But just got to throw it out there that maybe him being injured right now is actually a blessing in disguise for Florida, giving him a little bit of, when I say this, a little bit of time ahead of the playoffs to rest and get right. However, Vladimir Tarasenko is already right. And I just want to throw this out there because in his opening game with the Panthers, I just want to bring up his stat line. It was quite impressive. Sorry, his second game. 13 minutes, and he did all of this in 13 minutes. 2 goals, an assist, a +3 rating, 3 shots on net, and 2 hits. I don't know if he's going to be able to fill out the categories like that every single night, Steele, but he's playing on the second power play unit immediately, and I think this is going to bring value into the life of those like Sam Bennett and Anton Lundell on that second unit because now they've got a real veteran sniper who also looks, Steele, quite happy to be where he is in Florida and a little bit of a turnaround from how things were in Canada, Ontario.
I mean, he might be able to put up these type of production on a nightly basis because of how happy he is in Florida now. I mean, he just looked like he gained, 10 skill points in the first game and then another 10 points, skill points in the second game when he buried 2 goals and had a 3-point night. I mean, he's got to be super excited. He's going back to the Stanley Cup playoffs. After being with the Ottawa Senators this entire season, looking like it was going to be an absolute, dog show out there, and not a good one for that matter. No. So very happy for Vladimir Tarasenko. He gets on the board early. That's got to be one of the most biggest things for a player going to a new team is how quickly can you make a difference? How quickly can you get on the score sheet? He gets on the score sheet in the second game, has a 3-point night. And again, he only played just over 13 minutes in that game against the Calgary Flames. So I expect his average ice time to go up at least to 15 and a half, 16 minutes, if not more than that. But I agree with you. Being on that second power play unit with Anton Lundell and Sam Bennett, two guys who, had a little, not the guys that you expect to really go out there and put up some crazy numbers, but
with a nice offensive piece like Tarasenko.
Exactly. So I agree wholeheartedly with that point about them getting going on that second power play unit. And hopefully that transfers on to 5-on-5 play for that third line or for those other guys in the bottom six. So Vladimir Tarasenko has been really good so far in the two games. Just to finish up, I want to go back to Aaron Ekblad about some of our points from, what we expect from him next year. I do, a caveat, I guess you could say, he is still in his prime. He's 28 years old. He's in his prime right now. And so I don't want to, as much as I'm saying that the offensive struggles have been there, he's in his prime. Who knows what he's going to be capable of doing next year. But again, you and I both, we take injuries into consideration with almost every single player out there. He's been a guy who's been injured frequently over the last 5 years or throughout his entire career, actually. So that's something to keep in mind. But Aaron Ekblad, just want to wrap up with that.
Does it dictate where we immediately draft players? No. Will it always factor into our decision-making? I think when it comes to players like Aaron Ekblad, who have a long track record of major injuries, it has to. So there's injury point number one. And in terms of Ekblad's future, he is still very much fantasy relevant. In deeper formats, he's a keeper in a lot of deeper leagues still, just because when he is in the lineup, his ability to fill out the peripherals and the offense might fall short. But like you said, he's a bit of a beauty when it comes to just getting it done when he is in there. It's just his inability to stay in the lineup. We've talked all about it. We've covered it. Mitch Marner, not in the lineup. We got to talk about Mitchie because I'm going to talk about how they looked on Saturday, Steele, and he better come back in a hurry because also that's offensive fantasy production that's hard to replace. Check out Monday's waiver wire episode for some options. Bowen Byram's future, a Demko update, and bets. Today's episode is brought to you by a couple of friends. Number one, it's brought to you by Sleeper. It's almost the halfway point in the NHL season. Actually, it's past. And regardless of where you are in the standings, you need to be checking out Daily Fantasy Hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, just correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats, more or less than their projections. So make sure you're out there checking out the app. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you get $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Today's episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, baby. And with all the parts that you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay, guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Go over to the YouTube channel of Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. You can also find it now on Amazon Fire TV. Go hit that up as well. They are here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories, anything you could think of every single day, with local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single league. So make sure you go check it out on Amazon Fire TV and subscribe to the Locked On Sports Today's YouTube channel. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, hit the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. We've got Bowen Byram to talk about. We got Thatcher Demko to talk about. But let's get over to Mitch Marner from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Our boys over there. I'll set it up for you right now. Injured himself against the Boston Bruins last week. Looked like he toe picked and landed awkwardly when he came for that wraparound, and wasn't able to get a shot on net. But yeah, it looked like he just toe picked himself, landed awkwardly on his right leg or his right knee or whatever it was. I know it says day to day as of right now, but from what I've heard on TV and from Twitter, I think he's out at least a week, maybe 2 if the Leafs are trying to rest him a bit more for the postseason. But, that's just my take on it. It just, it's a self-injury. It's an awkward fall, and hopefully it's nothing too serious.
Most definitely. And look, there's something to be said about injuries at this time of year, and I mentioned one of the positive angles to it in a player like Ekblad, who over the course of his career has proven that, number one, because he eats so many minutes, he can be gassed at the end of the season.
Yeah,
he is in his prime, but it happens. And number two, key injuries at times, let him get it out of the way now. I know that's a bit of an intangible, but with Mitch, if this isn't one of those things where he's not able to play many games headed into the postseason and he doesn't really have his feet under him, this could actually end up being more detrimental to the Leafs than we think, Steele. So let's just leave it as it is for now. We'll take it at a game-to-game, week-to-week basis. But for fantasy GMs out there who most likely – this is going to be a very tough hurdle to climb, or to obstacle to hurdle, because Mitch has got 76 points in 62 games. And we know what he means for the Maple Leafs. And down the stretch here, and I was looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs schedule, they play the New Jersey Devils twice, the Canadiens, the Washington Capitals twice, the Penguins, and then they round it out with 2 tough ones against Tampa and Florida. But aside from I'm seeing the Philadelphia Flyers and Edmonton Oilers here, Steele, I'm looking at a whole bunch of very winnable games for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I'm going to say 2 things. Number one, I agree with you. I don't see them rushing him back until maybe into the point where let's try and get you a couple of games of regular season action under your belt point. And number 2, I'm taking a look at some of these peripheral pieces who are now going to get a bump in ice time. Calle Jarnkrok, Max Domi on that second line with John Tavares would be my first 2 immediate targets if you're looking for a flyer or a game-to-game bump, especially against some of these weaker opponents, because also both of those players are going to eat more minutes now on that secondary power play unit. So there's fantasy opportunities to be had here with Mitchie's absence over the next couple of games.
Yeah, and I think especially for a guy like Max Domi, who has shown us over the last 3 weeks that he has it in him to put up some offensive production, use his speed, use a quick little wrist shot where he just flicks the puck over glove side, which he's done a few times now. Yes. So I think Max Domi, Calle Jarnkrok as well would be 2 great ones to fill in that roster spot if you've got Mitch Marner on your IR right now and you need someone in your forward group. Bowen Byram, though, another team in the Atlantic Division, was just traded there from the Colorado Avalanche, obviously, at the NHL trade deadline. 2 points in 2 games. I mean, I think this is going to do wonders for this Buffalo Sabres team on the back end, especially in front of their netminder heading into next year. I think it's already doing that from the 2 games that we've seen. But I think that, the biggest question for me, which has now been answered, but the biggest question for me was, where are these players going to play? Bowen Byram, Rasmus Dahlin, and Owen Power. That's 3 young defensemen, 3 left shot defensemen, 3 left defensemen. So it was a question mark for me about which player or which left shot defenseman was going to go play on the right-hand side. It looks like it's going to be Bowen Byram on that top D pairing with Rasmus Dahlin. I think that's a beautiful fit for both those players. It gets Owen Power, continue to play on that second D pairing. Mm-hmm. And these are just 3 young defensemen who have, for me, this sky high limit and potential for what they can do fantasy wise, but also with the Buffalo Sabres.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I just had a very last minute take on what you were mentioning about Max Domi and the Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs rolled the dice by bringing in some character guys like Max Domi, Ryan Reeves. They need that kind of energy to translate over into the postseason. So I think Max Domi is one of those guys that I would double circle for a little fantasy value if he does catch fire. So I wanted to end that point. Also, what you're highlighting about the Buffalo Sabres future, I think excites me very much. And when I look at that first power play unit right now, Steele, I'm really not hating Dylan Cousins, Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck, Dahlin, and Byram.
Yeah.
That is the kind of combination that if they can really start to form some chemistry and see what happens when Matthias Samuelsson gets back healthy and tries to balance out those 3 pairings as well, because that's another good defenseman. Look, he's a second rounder, but he was the first pick in the second round. So call him a late first rounder as well. Lots going right now in Buffalo in terms of the young energy. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen also playing great. That's going to just feed into the energy and confidence of this young team. And I'm with you on Byram's future. Fantasy-wise, he's only 22 years old. And I think because of, again, and we're talking about high draft picks and expectations, 4th overall draft pick, I'm expecting him to perform at the 2nd season in his career for sure. 3rd season latest, I'm starting to get concerned. And I think that's what fantasy cats are getting a little impatient with Bowen Byram. But my last point is this, Steele. The talent that he has, the expectations we have for him, what does he need to succeed? Opportunity and ice time. And he was buried in Colorado. And take a look at his first 2 games in Buffalo. 24 minutes and almost 26 minutes of ice time. And that's exactly what he needs to develop a two-way game at this level and take his game to the status of where we expect it to be as a 4th overall draft pick. And that's only going to come if he's playing with 21, 22, and 23 plus minutes every single night.
And just to wrap this up with Bowen Byram before we get to break and Thatcher Demko, I mean, just looking at his shooting percentage, again, to your point, he's played a lot less minutes when he was in Colorado. He got buried on the blue line there. But his shooting, he doesn't put a ton of shots on net, but his shooting percentage has never been below 10.2. Career high shooting percentage of 15.4 back in the 2022 season. So, I mean, if this kid can continue to develop his game, continue putting shots on net, he's got a rocket of a shot from the blue line, a very underrated wrist shot. Just from that goal the other day that he scored. So continue to develop your game, continue to, get it, use your legs, use your speed, take the open ice that he's been given so many times now in the 2 games that he's played with Buffalo. But I mean, just continue to shoot the puck. I mean, this guy's got a rocket of a shot. He's got to put the puck on net more. And again, that will give him more goals. The shooting percentage hopefully stays the same, but he's got to do a little bit more on the shooting category for me. But again, 22 years old, the sky's the limit for all these young defensemen in Buffalo. We're going to get over to Thatcher Demko injury update very, very quickly. And of course, wrap up the show with big time bets. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's March Madness, baby. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number 1 seed, it's time to go dancing, go toe-to-toe on America's number 1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins.
Let's go.
That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, whatever you want. You can even pick who's going to win the tournament. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down those nets.
Pulling up to Mickey D's just for drinks? Oh yeah, that's me. Nothing extra, just perfection and a straw. Coming in hot for the coldest cups on the block. Because there are drinks. Then there are drinks from McDonald's.
Mix things up with any size lemonade or sweet tea for $1.49. Perfect with our classic fries. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit that subscribe, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Let's show you some love back in return with big time bets. But first, before we get there, we got to wrap up with Thatcher Demko injury update. It seems like he will be out for at least, 2 to 3 weeks, it said?
Yes,
was the
it
update
did. It said 2 to 3 weeks, but I listened to Farhan Lalji, TSN's Vancouver correspondent. He literally travels with the team. He mentioned twice in his bit on TSN this afternoon that it could be 2 to 4 weeks. Okay. And he kept mentioning exactly what I mentioned about Mitch Marner and getting a couple of games under his belt, how that might be important for his game. Given how much Demko has missed with injury, he's thinking that it's even more critical for Demko to have a couple of games of action under his belt, and that's what they're really aiming for, Steele. But if I'm listening to and reading between the lines here a little bit, this is a little bit of a concern for the Vancouver Canucks. This is their number 1 goalie, and right there after Hellebuck, he's the Vegas favorite for the Vezina. Is Hellebuck running away with it? 100%. However, Demko, for most of the season, has been right there in the conversation as one of the best goalies. His numbers back it up, 2.47 goals against. So look, shutouts 3rd. This is obviously huge. However, Casey DeSmith has proven in limited time that he can be a number one, quote unquote, fill-in goaltender. And I think what you'll see from the Vancouver Canucks, tease to bets in a second here, is perhaps the best out of this team, Steele, because if you want to be put to the test, there's no better way than the most critical part of the schedule without your number one netminder.
Exactly. And what might make it easier for these Vancouver Canucks is that they do have a 9-game homestand. They aren't leaving Vancouver until the end of March. So that could be very beneficial for the entire team, especially Casey DeSmith. However, with a few odd, easier games in there, the Anaheim Ducks, maybe the Montreal Canadiens as well, it is going to be a tough schedule remaining for the month of March. Colorado
Vancouver only has 6 losses on home ice this year, Steele. That's the least in the NHL, so even more important.
Exactly. They've been very good at home, but it is going to be a tough schedule. They got Colorado coming up tomorrow, Washington Capitals, Calgary Flames, LA Kings, Dallas Stars, and this is all without their number one goaltender. So even though Casey DeSmith has been great the last 2 games played or games started that he has been, the numbers haven't been very significant because of the small sample size.
He's worth an ad, though, if he's out there.
But he's definitely worth an ad. Again, I think we mentioned this yesterday or 2 episodes ago on Waiver Wire Monday. Only 2 games for the Vancouver Canucks this upcoming week, Colorado and the Washington Capitals. So maybe wait until next week, the week of March the 18th, to go pick up Casey DeSmith for some easier games against Buffalo, Montreal, and Calgary.
I might actually just go out there, add him, and stash him, knowing that he is going to get the run out. But I'm with you on maybe waiting till you deploy him, because that's a little bit of a tough stretch. And I just want to see what happens actually in the game tonight with Vancouver and Colorado. It's one of the picks that I'm going to talk about. I alluded to what I think this is going to mean for the Canucks in terms of perhaps really seeing what they can do and come together and prove that it hasn't just been, you're not just a one-trick pony. This is a team that is now with Elias Lindholm in tow. They added Philip Hronek over the offseason. They obviously brought in Zadorov. They inked Pettersson. Mm-hmm. They are built to go on a run now. I know I'm missing another piece they brought in, but that's okay. Right now, I got to talk about bets if you're ready, because
let's do it.
Been cooking, Steele. Your boy's been cooking, and I'm feeling it. Same game parlay Monday night. Don't know if you caught that. Trocheck with the empty netter saved our bacon and hit the parlay, but that's all that matters, because now we're back in business. Wednesday, 4-game betting board. And Steele, if you're cool with it, I'm just going to rattle off all 4 because I'm good to go, and I'm going to start right where I was alluding to, Colorado into Vancouver. And when I spoke about this, and I spoke about teams coming together, that's exactly what I think this is going to happen in terms of a defensive performance from Vancouver. They know they're going to need to bring it with Casey DeSmith in the cage, and they don't want to lose any kind of ground in the division. So I'm going to go Colorado, Vancouver, under the number. And when you've looked at how good both of these teams have been lately, Steele, a lot of their games have gone under the number. So that's where I'm going with my first pick, is Vancouver, Colorado, under 6.5. I know that might on paper look like flip. What are you doing? Because both of these teams clearly can bring it offensively. I'm going to go with it. Just ride with me on this one. It's going to have playoff implications and playoff-like atmosphere from the jump. My second pick, Winnipeg Jets on the money line at home against Nashville. I'll keep this one quick. The Nashville Predators have been red hot, but going up against Winnipeg, especially in Winnipeg, only 1 win in their last 7 trips to the peg. Winnipeg is playing very, very good hockey right now. They've also taken 2 of the last 3 against Nashville. Going with Jets on the money line, and my lock of the night. How can you not take the Connor McDavid show at home against the Washington Capitals? In his career, Connor McDavid has 22 points in 12 games against the Capitals, and I think he's set to go off. The Edmonton Oilers are cooking once again. No disrespect to Washington, but this is a tough spot on their western swing. Edmonton also I would lean to in a big way, giving McDavid over 1.5 points. Lock of the night. I'm feeling all 3. I'm going to hammer all 3.
I mean, I like all 3 of those picks.
I know you're wary of the under. That's okay.
I've got some variations to go off of here. Did you have the under in the Oilers Capitals game, or?
No, I would probably lean to the over there as well, but I had the under in the Colorado Vancouver, but I'm just liking Edmonton there too.
First pick of the night. Again, variations, but coming from the same games. First pick, taking the Avalanche on the money line against the Vancouver Canucks, -110. The Avalanche have won the last 3 contests against the Vancouver Canucks, I believe. Vancouver's won their last 4 games. Avalanche have won their last 3 games. Both
Colorado's won 3 straight with Vancouver. Yeah. You're correct. The last meeting, by the way, for my under's sake, on February 20th, 3-1 Colorado.
Yeah, so I don't hate the under. I actually like it a lot, so I might parlay this in the money line. I think it's going to be a close game, but just because Casey Smith is in the net, I'm going with the Colorado Avalanche at -110.
Fair.
Second pick, I'm actually going with the Oilers Capitals under 6.5 in this matchup at -128.
I don't hate it.
7 out of the last 8 games, not between these two teams, but just the Oilers' last 8 games, 7 times the under has hit. The Washington Capitals, for that matter, the last 4 games, the under has hit in their schedule. So some unders going for both these teams right now. I'm going to take the under 6.5 at -128 for my second pick. Final pick of the night. I'm taking the Predators on the puck line at +1.5 at -188 against the Winnipeg Jets. Look, the last 10 games for the Nashville Predators, they're 8-0-2. So they've either won the game or they've gone at least into overtime. I'm taking the Predators on the puck line at +1.5. It's more of a gut feeling, but they're playing some really good hockey. UC Saros has been absolutely fantastic in that time as well. Philip Forsberg, Gustav Nyquist, Ryan O'Reilly, all of their young guys are just, everything's meshing, everything's gelling right now. The Winnipeg Jets still might win, but I'm hoping it's at least in overtime. I like it. My lock of the night, though, I'm taking the Avalanche on the money line for my lock of the night.
We are going a little bit against each other tonight, Steele. I don't know how much I love
that. Small variations.
That's okay. I like the variations. I hope you guys have been feeling the picks. We're going to keep coming with the picks all week long. More breakdowns, more playoff previews. We will be breaking down every single playoff matchup once we find those out in a few weeks. We'll be keeping you up to date on all the waiver wire ads you need. Hey, we got you covered no matter what you are looking to do. Steele, take us away, my friend. I'm hyped for the rest of the week.
Hyped for the rest of the week and for tomorrow's episode. Thank you so much for making Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Once again, go check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Subscribe to their YouTube channel. Also, you can find them now on Amazon Fire TV. They are here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single league. So thank you so much again for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day out there. Good luck with all your bets tonight, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.
Every day, our world gets a little more connected, but a little further apart. But then, there are moments that remind us to be more human.
Thank you for calling Amica Insurance.
Hey, I was just in an accident.
Don't worry, we'll get you taken care of.
At Amica, we understand that looking out for each other isn't new or groundbreaking. It's human. Amica, empathy is our best policy.
Pulling up to Mickey D's just for drinks? Oh yeah, that's me. Nothing extra, just perfection and a straw. Coming in hot for the coldest cups on the block. Because there are drinks. Then there are drinks from McDonald's.
Mix things up with any size lemonade or sweet tea for $1.49. Perfect with our classic fries. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Hey, Prime members, you can listen to this Locked On podcast ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today.